Me and Oshayun first went to the temple, you were talking about Hinduism, we were talking about Ifa, and we realized, oh, we're speaking a very, very similar language. Like we could understand one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the story you just told about Arjuna on the chariot and the 5 horses. I mean, that's Ori.
You can live a life full of love and light if you just let the Spirit guide you. It's the remedy where you'll find peace, but you must let the Spirit guide you.
Who made y'all priests?
What's up, world? This is Awo Fafore.
What's going on, good people? This is our Sheun. Welcome back to the Who Made Y'all Priest podcast, where we talk about our spiritual journeys, our everyday life experiences, and the issues of the time from the perspective of two people who just happen to be priests. Fafore, what's going on, man?
What's good, man? What's good?
Man, we got this weather out here by me right now, man. Is it raining? Is it raining down there by you?
Nah, it's making some noise.
Oh yeah, it's
Uh,
coming then.
yeah, Sean gonna talking to the people, but it ain't no rain yet.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
gonna see how it go.
We just had sun blow through. They talking about possibly a tropical depression coming our way over the next 7 days. So that's something to think about.
Man, what the hell is a tropical depression? I swear they be coming up with all these names.
it's, it's
Like
it's it's rain. That's all you need to know. Is gonna be a lot of rain. And
that's what I'm saying.
that reminds me of the I think the storm that we had, Beryl, where uh you didn't know you had a generator.
A generator,
My boy don't be paying attention to nothing mechanical, nothing that got to do with fixing nothing. So he thinking that it's his neighbor making all that noise with the generator. Come to find out, it's his house. He the only one got lights. He think he's special.
yeah, yeah.
He the only one with lights.
But I'm gonna tell you what it was that did it. And this is like the practicality of spirituality. Man, when I woke up and it felt like I was at the bottom of the slave ship Jesus, like the way that wind and water was hitting the house, man, I woke up, went outside, butt naked, talked to Oya in my backyard.
Yeah,
And when
man.
I tell you, nothing was wrong. My Osu staff didn't even move an inch.
Oh yeah, mine didn't either. Mine didn't
You
either.
know, so I was good. No, nothing was wrong. I saw shingles from other people, that was in the yard, but no issues with me. So yeah, that's good, man. So anytime you got a storm coming your way, hurricane, tornado, whatever, man, go holler at Oya. Ideally, do it beforehand as opposed to doing it in the middle. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
you know,
Prevention is better than the cure, huh?
exactly, exactly. You
Right.
don't want to end up a day late and $1 short. So
Right.
do it at the beginning.
Yeah. So we got a good episode, man. We want to get right into it. This is gonna be an amazing episode. This is not something outside of our purview, but this is something that we like to do every now and again. We like to step outside of the box and talk to some different people about some different things. So that's what we're gonna do here today in this episode.
Absolutely, absolutely. But before we get to the person who will be joining us today, everybody, please, please, please hit that like button. It don't cost you no money. Just hit that like button for us. And hit that share button. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure whatever we presenting something today that your grandmama, your cousin, your girlfriend, your mistress, somebody is gonna get some good information out of it. So just go ahead, just share it now. You know what I'm saying? Don't even wait. Just go ahead and share it now. One other announcement. If you don't follow us on social media, make sure y'all stay tapped in because we have been doing monthly virtual e-board reads. We have one coming up this month of July. It'll be on July 27th, but we're doing it every month. So if you don't follow us on social media, tap in with us on Instagram at who.made.y'all.priest. or tap in with us on TikTok. Before I mess it up, O'Shea, you don't hit him with that TikTok.
Yeah, at Who Made Y'all Priests 11. At Who Made Y'all Priests 11. Yeah, get up with us on TikTok.
I definitely was about to mess that up. So I'm glad I said something.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, let's go.
Brother Scott, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and
Oh man, I'm
sit
psyched.
down
You
with
guys,
us.
I'm psyched for it, man.
Oh yeah, we
Look
really
forward to it.
appreciate you. We really appreciate you, man. So we want you to introduce yourself to the family. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
Oh, now we're on now.
We're
Hmm.
on now.
All right. My name is Sundarananda Das, and I am an initiated disciple of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Um, so that makes me what they call in the West a Hare Krishna, but
Hmm.
that's sort of a misnomer. We'll get to that. Um, so I basically exist to try to carry out my Guru Dev's wishes and to kind of follow, what he's prescribed for us to achieve our ultimate goal, which is, a long a long answer also, but we can get to that. So but basically the ultimate goal is to avoid rebirth.
Hmm.
The whole idea is that we are not the body, we're not the physical body, we are eternal spirit souls. And I use those words because that's, I guess the most common terms that people would be familiar with. So as eternal spirit souls, we've kind of been on this journey the whole time, incarnating into different bodies, um, to try to achieve the goal of stopping that cycle, getting out of that cycle.
Hmm.
And being in a human body gives us the greatest benefit, or the greatest opportunity, I should say, to get out of that cycle. Um, so that's the basics of it, really.
Hmm. Hmm. So talk to us a little bit because it's customary on the Who Made Y'all Priest podcast that we talk about our spiritual journeys.
Sure.
So talk to us a little bit about your spiritual trajectory and how you ended up in the spiritual system that you practice right now.
Well, as a kid, I went to Catholic school. Growing up in New York in the 70s, um, public school wasn't really the safest option,
Mm.
So my parents sent me to Catholic school. Now, while they were nominally Catholic, they weren't necessarily, exceptionally religious or anything like that. It's just,
Mhm.
that was the better option.
Right.
So, for whatever reason, growing up, I developed this obsession with religious history and with what I like to call, religious factuality.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
I just, for some reason or another, I had to know that what I was being taught was based in history, or verifiable by, history or archaeology or science. And in Catholic school in the 70s and 80s, asking too many questions was kind of frowned upon.
Right.
So I'll say that politely. Uh, so, I would ask questions and be met with um, answers that were, I just, to be polite, I'll say incomplete.
Mm.
For an example, one that stands out, I was in maybe seventh grade, eighth grade, something like that. And we were being taught about Jesus being arrested, the time when he's about to be arrested, and when he's in the garden with the apostles, getting ready and preparing them for everything that's about to happen. And Jesus asked the apostles, "Do you have swords?"
Mhm.
And they're all kind of like, "No, no. What are you talking about?" And Jesus gets kind of annoyed with them, at least in the text as it's translated, he gets annoyed, and he's like, well, what do you mean you don't have swords? You need to go get swords. If you have to, you sell your garments in order to get them. Whatever you need to do, you need swords.
Mhm.
So they wind up going ahead and doing that. So, the next morning when he's arrested, the first thing that happens, one of his apostles pulls out one of the swords and cuts off the ear of the Roman centurion. And, this was not in line with the Jesus they'd been teaching me about.
Right.
In school, prior to that, this was an entirely different character. So
This was the flipping over the tables Jesus who did that.
this is that, yeah, exactly. This is that Jesus. So I raised my hand and I asked the question, like, hey, why is Jesus having his apostles buy swords, buy weapons? Like, what's, why that doesn't really fit in with everything you've told. And, the response I got was that I'm not supposed to ask those kinds of questions. And they got mad and called my parents saying that, I'm questioning the Bible. And I'm not really questioning the Bible. I'm asking you to please clarify, what it is you're teaching me, tell me more, give me more details. So that didn't happen. And later on, I found out, it took like an old Indian man to give me the answer and to explain to me what I was missing, or the parts of the story that were left out. Quickly, the apostles, the majority of them, were members of a group called the Sicarii. Sicarii literally means dagger men. Right, now these were, revolutionaries who, their main objective was to get the Romans out of there, to end this occupation, and so they, for example, Judas Iscariot, that name, Judas Iscariot, that last name indicates that he was a member of the Sicarii, Iscariot. So if she would have just given me that little bit of information as, the background of these guys that he was surrounding himself with, that would have clarified everything. That would have been fine. Hey, right. Oh, okay. So that explains it. That's why. Same thing with the turning over of the tables. At that time, the temple was not just some little rinky-dink hut. It wasn't some place where, anyone could just go in there and get it. There was a Roman garrison there. There were Hebrew garrison there. This is where the center of, at the time, banking, money exchange, all this was going on at the temple. This was the place. This was the hub of business at the time. You couldn't just go in there like by yourself, just like flipping over tables and throwing money around. You'd get yourself killed instantly. You know what I mean? But if you had a substantial force with you of armed people, you're more likely to get away with something like that, So anyway, so these things, left me, with questions with no answers. So I started to go visit different places. The Theosophy Lodge. Are you familiar with Theosophy at all? So I started to visit the Theosophy Lodge. I started to go visit. I would go to this synagogue. I would go to the Sikh Gurdwara. I'd go to all these different places just to ask questions because I wanted to fill in the blanks. Fill in the other parts of the story that I wasn't getting. Because historically, if we want to really look at the details of these texts, many of these texts in the New Testament were written a good while after the events that they portray. The earliest existing versions of these we have 25 to even 75 years after the characters they portray would have left the earth and wouldn't be around anymore. So I mean, if I'm going to sit here and write a biography of I don't know, George Washington, say, I can't sit here and write it as if I'm an eyewitness, and I can't even say I spoke to any eyewitnesses. I can't get it, so all the details I'm getting are second, third, fourth, fifth hand at best, so oral traditions do not necessarily keep the details and the facts straight. It's like playing telephone when you're a kid and you're playing telephone.
Right.
It's playing telephone over a couple of hundred years or a couple of thousand years sometimes. So you can't really rely on the historical accuracy of some of these documents. So the best way to find out the details of what you're asking about is to look at the other things that are involved in those texts. Okay, when they're talking about there's sometimes mention of different plant life or different animal life or different leaders, like say when they mention different Roman leaders or different Egyptian leaders, say in the Old Testament. Using that, you can start to try to date the documents or the stories that they're talking about. You can start to, from that, figure out the location. You can kind of narrow it down a little better than someone just telling you, oh no, just accept what's written there. Even though it's written, you're reading in a language that it wasn't written in to begin with, and you're reading something that was written by someone, 100 years or so after the facts that they're writing about. So, by using these other things, you can figure it out, So that was a lot of my intention in going to places like the Theosophy Lodge, where you can kind of get your hands on texts that weren't necessarily included in the Bible, or texts that were written in other cultures or in other areas at the same time period as those that you want to know about. You know what I mean? So you can get kind of the story from a different angle, or get a different piece of the story that'll kind of fill in the blanks. So in doing that, I would often be met with kind of the same problem. You don't really question the text. You just take it as it's written, and that's it. Until I showed up at a Vaishnava temple one day. And I go in, I visit the or what people call the Hare Krishna temple. I go in there and I sit down and I'm listening to the lecture. And I remember one of the first questions I asked, because I'm a young teenager. I'm 15, 16 years old. So the details I needed weren't necessarily the details I need now, but at the time, there was something being spoken about and the word Vimana was used. So I just raised my hand. Can you tell me what that word Vimana means? And the lecturer says, oh, it means flying ships. Hold on a minute. What language is this in? He says Sanskrit. So I said, why is there a 5,000-year-old word for flying ships? There's no 5,000-year-old word for television. There's no 5,000-year-old word for refrigerator.
Right.
Why is there a 5,000-year-old word for flying ship? And he just kind of looked at me. He says, exactly. There's no 5,000-year-old word for televisions because there were no televisions. There was no need for that word. There was no 5,000-year-old word for refrigerator because there's no need for that word. So of course, in my mind, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You know what I'm saying? So after that first class, I started showing up. Like one of the priests there said to me, hey, look, if you have questions, are you reading, Bhagavad Gita or anything like that? I said, yeah, actually, I've just started reading Bhagavad Gita. So, all right, look, why don't you, during the week while you're reading, write down, whatever questions you have, and then, come meet with me here once a week. And I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm going to tell you where you can find those answers. This way you're not taking my word for it. And just, I'm not the authority here, And, that blew me away because that was completely different from anything I'd been told before.
Right.
You accept what is written as it's written, and that's it. So this is a completely different situation where I'm being told not only should you not accept the answer from the person you're being told, but we're going to give you all the places and the resources to find that answer for yourself. So you can be sure that what you're hearing, kind of jives with what you're learning and what you believe. So, so that, that sold me right away, of course, and I stuck with that. And then eventually, in our tradition, the process is that you find, or once you hear someone speak who kind of, speaks to you in a way that gets through, and that isn't, they're not speaking in any kind of clouded, flowery language, but in a way that works for you. It's like, oh, I can hear this person. This makes me understand. Um, you request to become a student, basically, of that particular teacher. And if they accept you, then they train you and educate you, and that they will be the one to initiate you, or ordain you eventually. um, so I had found one of my friends who was living in the brahmachari ashram, which is, that's the brahmachari ashram is the celibate monks portion of the temple.
Mhm.
Those are the guys with like the saffron colored
Right.
robes. And so one of my friends, he hands me this book. He says, "Hey, check this book out. This isn't one of the gurus from this particular organization, but this is the closest friend of the guru who started this organization. He had the guru who started that particular organization had left his body about 20 years before. Yeah, about 15 years before. So he gives me this book, and I read this. And it was like everything I'd been taught over the last couple of years all of a sudden was being spoken in a completely different way. It was like I was reading a translation into my language, but this book was written in my language. It was almost written for me, like, "Hey, you listen, check this out." And everything that I had had read about and learned about was so, all of a sudden, so clear. And he wasn't teaching me anything different. It's just he was saying it in such a way that I didn't need to like think about it or interpret it, or or figure out how I felt about it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so I turned around to my friend, and "Hey, you got any more of these books?" He's like, "Sure." And so he gave me a couple more. So I started writing letters to the author of the book, and he started writing back. Before I got the second or third letter, my friend told me, "Hey, so this guru Narayan Maharaj, who the books you've been reading, he's coming to America." And I was like, "Oh wow, we have to go see him. We have to." And he kind of laughed. He's like, "I've already recommended you to him. I've already given him your name, and he's well aware that you want to go see him." And so um so the next letter I got back from him was that he had accepted me as his student,
Mhm.
and that I would meet up with him when he came to America, so I could take initiation. And that's what happened.
Mhm.
Wow, wow. So what that first book? What's the name of that first book, and what's the author?
The first one that I read of his was called. Let me see. I can probably pull it out. Well, it's "The Nectar of Govinda Leela." It's called, and so then when I needed more, I got another one called "Shower of Love," and "Shower of Love" was actually the one that kind of hit the hardest because it was a collection of his meetings or lectures with other devotees all around the world,
Mhm.
and he's speaking to them, and it was like, it wasn't like he wasn't speaking as this kind of like heavy authority figure, with all the information, and some kind of like detached, like spiritualist who's like, "All right, well, this is." It was such a he spoke with such familiarity. It was almost like a grandparent. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Right,
And
right.
it was it wasn't. One time when he came to Houston, actually, he was in the airport, and a reporter actually asked him, "What's it like to be, to come here and be met by uh, all your followers, in the airport?" And he corrected her. He said, "I don't have followers. These are my friends." And that was always his position. He always came from that position, so that when he was teaching you anything, it wasn't like, he was some authority figure who's teaching you something you didn't know. This was a friend who's like letting you in on this confidential information. Like, hey,
Right.
this is what I found out. Check this out. You need this.
Right.
So that always, of course, sat well with me.
Mm.
Awesome.
But yeah, the Nectar of Govinda Lila was the first one, and then Shower of Love was the second. And from then, I just started reading all of his translations of the ancient texts, like his version of his translation of Bhagavad Gita and things like that. Because, like I said, it just the voice that he spoke with and wrote with was so much. It fooled you into learning. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. And how would you spell, or how do you spell his name? Because I'm sure there's going to be some people watching who are going to want to
Sure,
look up
sure.
those books.
His name is Narayan, Narayan, Maharaj, Maharaja. And there are different titles. You'll often see Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and these are all just to let you know like who he is or what level he is. But that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, if you had to describe what Hinduism is, how would you describe Hinduism and where did it start?
Okay. See, Hinduism, the word Hinduism is a misnomer. I like to explain to people sometimes there's no such thing as Hinduism. When the Muslims first invaded India, okay, everyone who lived on the other side of what they called the Sindhu River, they named them Sindhus. It was like this umbrella term. It was a geographical term, So the people there at the time, they spoke Sanskrit, and they didn't call it the Sindhu. They called it the Indus River, but it came out kind of as Hindus, the Hindus River. So these people were all referred to as Hindus. Now there, 100 different religious traditions there at the time being practiced, but they were just put under this. It's like, imagine someone coming here for the first time, and they see all the people like outside of the Houston airport or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, these people are all Houstonians. That's not describing their religion. You know what I mean? That's not describing what they believe. So so you'll never find the word Hindu or Hinduism in any ancient text anywhere. It just doesn't exist. So that was never used as a name for any kind of religious practice or anything like that. But then, over time, the British came and took over India, and as colonizers do, they minimized basically, any of they don't really attach very much. And again, I'm trying to be polite here and choose my words carefully. Colonizers tend to not necessarily attach any importance to the beliefs or traditions or culture of the people that they're colonizing.
Right.
So, so to them they just said, oh, who are these people? Oh, the Hindus. Oh, okay, yeah, they're the Hindus. They just believe in some wacky primitive nonsense.
Right.
Until of course the time came when the first translations were done from the Sanskrit of some of the ancient texts. First ones were done in German, I believe, and then after that was English. And they started to realize that a lot of these texts that were written, a couple of thousand years before their own religious tradition had their texts written, there were a lot of similarities, and there were a lot of stories that seemed to have been that these had to be copied from Christianity.
Right.
But they were, they were written long before there was any, Christianity. So that kind of turned things around later. But over time, people just accepted being called, Hindu, because it's not necessarily a derogatory term. It's just not a term that describes any kind of religious tradition or anything like that. So practitioners of those traditions that existed in that time refer to their practice as Sanatan Dharma. This is this means that we don't really consider even our tradition or our practices to be a religion.
Mm.
Sanatan Dharma means the eternal function of the soul.
Mm.
So, it is our belief that our practices um, are not necessarily um, you know playing out uh, these different roles or enacting these different reenacting these different stories that are meant to give you some kind of spiritual enlightenment. Ours is that our position is that our belief system it comes from time immemorial. There's no it has no beginning,
Mm.
and it's not based on any texts written by man. It is based on what our actual soul, our actual being needs to do, in order to thrive and in order to progress. So Sanatan Dharma is often what is referred to is often what we refer our religious tradition to be.
Mm.
That's what we
Mm.
call it. So now, with that said, however, under that umbrella of Hinduism, there was, like I said, in so many different religious traditions. Um, but it turns out that they weren't necessarily different traditions. Um, they were just differences in language and differences
Mm.
in symbolism. So a lot of the time you'll have people say to me like, well, you're not a monotheist. You believe in multiple gods. We don't necessarily consider all of these different beings to be gods in the sense that your average person uses the word gods. They're
Mm.
we consider them to be elevated beings, of different sorts and different status. um but kind of like the way how in certain sects of Christianity they accept that there are different, say, archangels.
Mhm.
And there's a hierarchy. There are different, and they're more like servants or helpers. you know
Right.
so they're not necessarily what we consider to be God. They are just different embodied souls that are part of a hierarchy and have different job titles, basically.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there'll be a lot of you'll have you can have 5 different temples that you visit, say, and there will be 5 different deities on the altar. In each one there's a different one. All of those represent different aspects of the same deity.
Mhm.
Not necessarily different deities. So and also there are how, say, and like I said, I use Christianity as example a lot of the time because that's what I'm familiar with from the early days.
Right.
um and I think that's kind of most people can make that connection and know what I'm talking about. The You'll have certain practitioners focus on, say, uh young Jesus. You know what I mean? Who's teaching in the temple or something. That's when they're praying or meditating. So that's kind of their focus. Then you have others who focus more on the crucified Jesus, or the one who was about to be crucified. The teacher, or Rabbi Jesus, who was about to be crucified. Then you have other people who focus more on the risen Jesus, afterwards. Then you have other people who focus on what they call, what they refer to as God the Father. You know who set the whole thing into motion. Um, so these aren't all different people. These are just different aspects of the same being or same entity. So different names are used to describe that particular entity. Like when some people refer to they'll, when they're praying or meditating, they'll only refer to him as, say, Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Some refer to him as only Jesus, or someone praying, they'll use Yahweh. Some use Jehovah. That they're not talking about completely different people. There's when I'm in the temple, or when I'm dealing with other Vaishnavas, they refer to me as Sundarananda or Sundarananda Das. My kids call me Dad. The say, people at work, they'll use, my previous name. They'll use, they'll call him, Mr. Mess Around or whatever. Of course, they're not all talking about or referring to different people,
Right.
but the name that we used, the name that we use to address this person or this entity, is based on our specific relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, like, that's why people at work aren't going to call me Dad, or, you know what I mean? Or, so, because our relationship with them dictates, what term of endearment we use, or what descriptive terms we use, So we find in our tradition that there's been some confusion from people from outside of tradition. We're saying, like, well, wait a minute, you don't worship the same God. You said that you call God Krishna, and this guy calls God Vishnu, or this guy, so we're referring to the same entity, just different names used based on each of our individual relationships with that entity. And
Right.
then by the same token, you have growing up in New York, people with the vowel at the end of their last names tend to have an affinity for Mary, the Virgin Mother.
Mm.
Okay, actually, I found that a lot down here. Also, after moving down here, a lot of Mexican people also have that same kind of attachment to the Virgin Mother, and you'll see that on the back of cars instead of, like, say, a crucifix or whatever.
Right.
So people, Catholics especially, they'll often pray to Mary, or you do the Hail Mary, the Rosary beads, the whole thing. That they're not, in doing so, in paying respects to this entity who's not necessarily God. You know what I mean? They're using this entity as kind of a via medium, you know what I mean, a way to get to that entity, and
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and so we have the same sort of tradition. Like, for us, you've noticed on our altars that there's male and female deities. There's Krishna and Radharani. We've read that Krishna will accept anyone who is recommended by Radharani. So a lot of us, my guru used to kind of put this on us too, like, hey, go through her. You know what I mean? If you want to see the boss, you got to make an appointment with the secretary, right?
Right.
You need to go to the, so it's like, all right, so I'm going that way. I'm getting in that way. So people who do that and pray that way aren't necessarily practicing a different religion, just, a different aspect of that same tradition. Like for example, you have some people who they'll worship Shiva. Say, okay? My guru had pointed out at one point that every depiction, or most of the depictions you see of Shiva's praying, chanting on beads.
Mm-hmm.
So my guru pointed out, well, if Shiva's God, who's Shiva praying to?
Right.
So it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, yeah, So you learn the subtleties when you're in it, and you figure out what is meant by the term Hinduism, and what's not meant by the term Hinduism, So that was the long answer.
So I'm glad you brought up the different aspects of the same entity. For most of us in our practice, that's what we believe as well. That these are different aspects of the same thing, unseparated segments of this grand consciousness.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
so, talk to us a little bit about the cosmology of Hinduism. Like, what is there a creation story? Is there something that begins the universe per se from Hinduism's perspective?
So don't have the way. Oh, I should say we don't have it. In our tradition, we don't necessarily. And when I keep saying our tradition, I mean in my particular
Hmm.
branch or sect. We refer to ourselves. We are called uh, Vaishnavas. Right. So the term Vaishnava means basically of Vishnu or
Hmm.
from Vishnu. So that's kind of Vishnu is who we view as kind of like the top of the pyramid.
Hmm.
Um, so we don't have a belief in say the way Christians do that, like, oh, God created each of our souls.
Hmm.
You know, we don't. We have the belief that our souls are eternal. We've always existed and always will. Each of our individuals. So we weren't, created one day in heaven and sent down, by the stork. We don't really. That's
Right.
not really our story. Um, so we believe that we have always existed and always will exist, um, which I'll get to a little more detail about that um, after. But we believe that we all came from the same place. Not that we were, born in the same place, but we all manifested Vishnu, according to our beliefs, um, has different servants, employees, whatever you want to call them, the heads of different departments,
Hmm.
who manifested all of the different areas of creation, you know. Um, from and when I say this, keep in mind that most of us are not literalists in the sense that I'm not. Um, we're big on symbolism. You know,
Hmm.
we're,
Hmm.
and so we have this idea that all of creation, and I use the word creation without necessarily meaning creation,
Hmm.
all of manifested reality uh, came from basically uh, Vishnu being bored and 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 lying on what we call the Milky Ocean, um, which is not necessarily the Milky Way, but what we think of as this kind of um, pre-creation kind of realm, um, where he laid back and had a lotus flower manifest out of his belly button, and from that, Brahma kind of was the head of the department of, all right, we're going to set up this world, we're going to set up this world, we're going to set up this realm, we're going to set up, this plane of existence, this plane of existence, um, and kind of populated these different planes of existence with all of the existing souls or jivas, and there's some sects, I guess I should say, or some denominations believe that we were all with Krishna or Vishnu at some point originally, and that we all kind of fell down into this lower existence
Hmm.
and are now fighting to get back. Whereas some of us believe that we were never necessarily with Krishna or Vishnu, and that we didn't fall. We're just going through
Hmm.
a natural process to get out of this cycle, and that process also involves what we call the yugas. We have a belief that there are different stages of existence. Right? Um, there are four of them: Satya Yuga, uh, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and then Kali Yuga. There's the last one, which is the age we believe we're in right now. Each of these are shorter and shorter as you go on. And the age that we're in right now, Kali Yuga, is considered to be 432,000 years long. And each of these ages, at the beginning, we are, there is spiritual enlightenment. People are at a much different level of consciousness than we are now. And with each age, it becomes degraded more and more. Like we think of it as a say a bull, right, on four legs, right? That is all of time. With each age, the bull loses a leg. So now in this fourth age, the bull is standing on one leg, and we consider this to be the age of decay and hypocrisy and ignorance. So it makes it much harder to achieve the goal of ending the cycle of birth and death and getting out of this whole cycle of what we call samsaras, the samsara cycle of, like I said, birth and death and birth and death. Because when it comes down to what is the cause of death for everybody,
You start breathing.
Yeah, we couldn't die if we weren't born, right?
Right.
So, right. So yeah, we started breathing. Like birth is the cause of death for everybody. So it in the end, it's like I'm not one of those people who who hates the world and and thinks that's a little too depressing for me. But in these bodies, in this particular place, this old age and disease and and all kinds of violence and ignorance and stuff. It's not. If I had a choice, I wouldn't necessarily live in a place with all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to get out of it is to not be born into it.
Right.
So if I can get to a place where spiritually or get to a certain consciousness where I don't have to return to this, then that's favorable. That's the goal. So
Right.
so that's why we do everything that we do, and we don't I don't believe that, like, oh, God put me in this place, or God screwed me over by making me because and going back to my earliest kind of comparisons of when I decided that Christianity wasn't for me, and there's always the question of that age-old question of why do bad things happen to good people? Well, like why would God allow for these kids to get hit by a truck in the middle of the street and killed? Or why would, what I mean? Like, you have people asking, where was God during slavery? Like, where, it's like, wait a minute, I thought this was the loving creator, our loving parent. Why would that be? Why would these things be allowed by a loving parent? In our tradition, we learn about our individual karma and karmic reactions.
Yeah.
We learn about the different trials that we're put through, or that not necessarily that we're put through, but that we choose to go through. Not choose, like, on the level of not on this human conscious level, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go outside and get hit by a car so I can learn better safety practices, and
Right.
not in that way, but
So I can learn pain management.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that what we are, our jiva, can go through these different trials, I guess is the best word for them, so that we can manage our way out of here and not to have to return to this place. You know, I've seen a meme where you see there's like a bunch of Hindus holding up signs saying end reincarnation. You know what I mean? Like, don't come back. And that's exactly it. You know, and the meme was meant to be humorous, but that's what we're about. You know,
Right,
let's
right.
let's stop this whole thing. You know,
And that
if
is
I
pretty, and that's pretty identical to E5. E-
yeah.
e- e- Even we have stories where people went to Olodumare saying, "Hey, I'm tired of going back and forth to Earth. Can we cut that out?"
Yeah, I
And
mean,
they were given a very specific reason of why you have to continue to make the journey back and forth.
it's like every time I go to this place, I get beat up, I get hurt. You know what I mean? Like I watch the people I care about get killed and
Hmm.
and I'll come back tomorrow. You know, why would you keep going? You know what I mean? At some point, you're like, hey,
Yeah,
wait a minute. If I don't come back to this place, then I'm not in the place where this happens. That's what that's the goal.
Right.
So.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the
yeah.
same for us. And if we call it the good position, where
Mhm.
our goal is to eventually not have to reincarnate again. We may not
Yeah.
use that language,
Right.
reincarnation and things like that, but it's the same. It's the same concept.
Mhm.
Um, Another one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about, I came across some information that said that Shiva means that which is not, and that everything that is has come from that which is not. If that's correct, let us know. If it's not, then correct us and help us understand what someone may have meant by that.
So there are different, um, like I said, not I use the word denominations, but that's not necessarily the correct term.
Hmm.
What that means or what that's saying is, a lot of people who come from a Western way of thinking, they, you know, they need to have explanations of other traditions kind of fit into a certain box, into terms that they can understand and deal with.
Mhm,
And I'm
Hmm.
sure you've seen that happen before.
mhm,
And
Absolutely.
it's funny because I've had people tell me, when they find out, what tradition I'm part of or whatever, oh, I'm not into Eastern religions. And I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, is Jesus from Cleveland?
Right.
Wait, Christianity, Judaism, it's like those are not Eastern traditions. You know what I mean? How far east are we talking about? You know what I
right.
mean? It's like, so it's funny because there, unless you are a Scientologist, say, or you're not really a part of a Western tradition, or nothing that you believe comes from a Western tradition. So a lot of people have to have Hinduism explained to them in a with the concept of a trinity.
Mhm,
Okay, so you have Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. The so you have the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer. You know, so calling Shiva the destroyer is not necessarily accurate.
Hmm.
There are other entities or deities that we would associate with that, like Kali, like Mother Kali. But the idea is that in order to create, you have to destroy.
mhm,
Yeah.
You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. I think that's the term people use, right?
right.
You know,
Hmm.
so the idea is that this, or I should say, this idea exists that you can't have anything in existence that did not originate from non-existence. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? You can't, like I
Hmm.
said, you can't make eggs without, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. So the idea is that for people who view Vishnu as the top of that, I mean Shiva as the top of that pyramid, um, there's this idea that we came from basically a nothingness, you know, um, and that kind of falls more into the realm of Buddhism. The idea of Buddhism is that when you leave the body, the goal is not necessarily to go back to where we came from. The goal is to merge into this void, this nothingness, basically. Which, I mean, personally, I find that a little, a little depressing.
Right.
So we don't necessarily subscribe to that belief that that there is this in the beginning there was nothing. You know what I mean? Because we kind of adhere to the belief that there was always something, and we always were, and we were always a part of that something, and then we just eventually kind of dispersed and distributed around. So, but for people who view Shiva as the highest, they hold to that belief that goes more along with Shiva's personality.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. In E5, we do kind of have that concept of something coming from no thing, but it doesn't mean literally like nothing. It just is, we can't identify it,
Right. The
right? Like,
unidentifiable is different from
yeah,
nothing. Right.
absolutely,
Absolutely. Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
and
it comes
that's where
from
we are.
this, yeah, it comes from this space of something that you can't identify
Mm-hmm.
to something that is now identifiable on
Mm-hmm.
the earthly plane.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right. My
Yeah.
first introduction to, I won't say introduction, the first time I ever picked up the Bhagavad Gita, I was fascinated by Arjuna.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a little bit about Shiva, let's talk a little bit about Arjuna. It's my understanding that Arjuna is not necessarily a person, but it symbolizes something. So talk to us a little bit about Arjuna and the role that Arjuna plays in the Bhagavad Gita.
So Arjuna. Arjuna is amazing because this is considered the great hero. But Arjuna is the great hero who absolutely did not want to be what he was. You know what I mean? He didn't necessarily choose that. Using some symbolism, think about the imagery in the Bhagavad Gita. Right, the very first thing you hear about is uh, there's someone asking for a description of what's going on. Someone who's blind.
Mhm.
Right, that's the very first page and the very first thing. Someone who's blind saying, please, Sanjay, tell me, about, this whole thing, because they're blind. So, of course, that's the very simple base symbolism of that. Obviously, they're not visually blind,
Right.
you know. So the first thing that's being described are these two armies assembled on either side of this battlefield. Now you have Arjuna, who is on his chariot, and his chariot driver is Krishna, and he brings Arjuna out into the middle of the two armies assembled, right? And as the basics of the beginning of the story is that Arjuna sees on either side, family members, friends, teachers. He's like, I can't do this. I can't kill these people. I can't fight these people, And Arjuna just, he puts his weapons down. He's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So the very first thing that's explained to him is that in deciding not to get involved and not to fight, he is denying his nature. Okay, Arjuna is what's called a kshatriya, a warrior. That's like, if someone brings a dentist in to a room with a bunch of kids who need dental work done, and he says, like, well, some of these kids are related to me, so he said, I can't do it. I'm not doing it.
Right.
You're not doing it. This is your thing. This is what you do. This is what you were designed to do. You know what I mean? This is where this is where you go in now and do your thing. Arjuna decided, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to do any of this. I can't. Arjuna's on this chariot. All right. There are 5 horses in front of the chariot, pulling the chariot. The chariot represents the body, the physical body.
Mm.
Okay. Arjuna represents the jiva, the soul inside the body. Okay? The 5 horses are said to be the 5 senses, that are pulling the body in every direction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because, that's, because we're in these particular vehicles, that's how it works. We are directed by wherever these senses, tell us to go.
Right.
So Krishna is what we call the super soul, basically. We believe that inside all of us, where the soul resides, also resides some portion of the ultimate or super soul, that we can kind of tap into for guidance. Krishna sits down and says, okay, wait a minute, we're going to talk here. And the entire Bhagavad Gita is literally just the conversation with Krishna and Arjuna, with Krishna explaining to Arjuna why, giving up is not an option. Not doing anything is not an option. The battlefield that they're on, Kurukshetra, is our entire life. And all of the people that are on that battlefield are the other souls, the other entities that we're going to encounter and have to deal with on this whole journey, this whole path. So, Arjuna isn't necessarily considered to be a historical figure, but he's supposed to represent the soul that has incarnated here and is now engaged in this battle. You know what I mean? Which, if you've read Bhagavad Gita, you know that, by the end he gets it. You know what I mean? And he clears house and does what he's supposed to do. He actually realizes what his dharma, his function, his purpose is, and realizes that, like, I can't just deny what my purpose is and what I'm here for. So I go and do it. It's not that he's doing it because Krishna told him to. Krishna just explained to him why he's in the position that he's in, and why you are a warrior and not just some guy who's sitting here. Your job isn't just to clean up after everybody else. You know what I mean? Your job is to get in there and actually do the job. You know what I mean?
Right.
So Arjuna has always been there. Bhagavad Gita is one chapter of a larger work, the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of stories in the Mahabharata that lead up to the Battle of Kurukshetra and lead up to the Bhagavad Gita, where you see the development of Arjuna and his family and his brothers and how it all kind of got to that point, which makes it even more kind of devastating that he just decided, no, I'm not doing it.
Right.
So once you go back and you read the prequels, and then it's like, whoa, wait a minute, this is us. This is us they're talking about, each of us that they're talking about here, and we don't. Most of us don't like to accept that the work that needs to be done is individual, and it's what I mean. It's not someone else can't do it for you. You can't go into a room with a bunch of people like we're going to pray for you, and that that'll get you through it. Like that's not really how it works.
Right.
For the job to get done, it's individual. Each person has to do their own part.
Absolutely.
Or each jiva, I shouldn't say person, each entity that we are. It's like I used to explain to my kids when we were little. I would ask, like, my son, where's Mikey? And my son would point to himself. I was like, well, no, that's Mikey's chest. Where's Mikey? He's like, no, that's Mikey's head. Like, where's Mikey? It's, to try to get and understand that, like, all of these things, even the way we say it, like, this is my hand. These are my eyes. Who's saying that? Who's saying my? Who's claiming these possessions? You know what I mean? We are not this thing. We're inside this thing. It's you know, I've told my kids, like, technically I don't know what you look like. It's like I'm standing, you're sitting inside your car, and I'm outside the car, and you've got tinted windows, and I'm outside the car, and I'm talking to the window. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I can't see, who you are inside there. If I had my arms and legs amputated tomorrow, I wouldn't be, 50% Sundarananda. I'd still be me. I'd just have, less facility, or I'd have, less of my vehicle,
Right.
Right.
but
Absolutely.
that wouldn't diminish, who I am, or what percentage I am, what I am, or who I am. So a lot of the stories about Arjuna leading up to Bhagavad Gita is kind of fill that whole thing in, and kind of give you the whole idea of, like, oh, wait a minute, this is not some guy. This is us. This is the mirror we're looking at here.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that I love about this conversation, and kind of to back up a little bit because we did mention this. So, um, a long time ago, I don't know how long ago it was at this point, but there was this thing that happened in Texas where the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Texas and the Grand Lodge of Texas came together and decided it was no longer um, an ideal situation for our two Grand Lodges to kind of ignore one another. Right? It was, let's come together and kumbaya. And we can go to each other's lodges and we can sit and do ritual work together. And so as soon as that happened, the lodge
I
that
still,
O'Shayun and myself were involved
yeah.
in, we went to Sundar's lodge. And that's how we met long time ago. I remember being in there and you kept asking me, and I think you were a past master at this point, correct?
So yeah, yeah.
Okay. And I remember you kept coming to me and asking, and kept telling me, hey, there's food here, go ahead and eat. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. But you kept checking on me. And then finally I was like, well, I'm vegan. And you were like, oh, I'm vegan too. So just to give people some context that, we've known each other for many years. We've been to your temple couple times. And so this isn't something that we just kind of fell upon, like, oh, we met somebody who practiced Hinduism,
Right.
and hey, we invited you on the show. So some of the questions actually that we're going to get into are conversations that we had with you. And I was like, oh, or O'Sheaun was like, oh, we definitely need to talk about that, when you come onto the podcast. So I just wanted
I mean,
to.
there had to be the kind of introductory stuff, of course. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I
yeah,
wanted to let
but yeah,
people know that. But one of the things that made O'Shane and myself say, oh, we gotta, have him on the podcast is because it's like I've watched somebody who was from Italy, who only spoke Italian, speak to a Mexican who didn't know Italian but knew Spanish. I watched them be able to have a full conversation. This was 20 some odd years ago. And I was shocked and amazed that they could speak their unique languages and understand one another. And so when me and O'Sheaun first went to the temple, you were talking about Hinduism, we were talking about Ifa, and we realized, oh, we're speaking a very, very similar language. Like we could understand one another.
hmm hmm
Like the story you just told about Arjuna on the chariot and the five horses, I mean, that's Ori right
Mhm.
there,
Mhm.
And so all these different concepts that you speak about, we may talk about it in a different way, but it's the same concept. So I just wanted to add that in there for people who people may be watching and they practice Hinduism, they're not familiar with Ifa, or vice versa, that they'll be able to understand, or some other tradition, religion, or spiritual tradition, they'll be able to realize, like, hey, there's a very common thread to a lot of these traditions. And as my brother Osheun always said, people keep saying the same thing, it has to be the truth.
Mhm.
So
Well, that's the thing. I don't think, in my little mind, I don't think of it as, oh, all of these things, borrowed from each other. I'm like, no, they all came from a common source.
Absolutely.
Like you said, if people keep saying it, there's got to be some truth to it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But it's not even just that people keep saying it. Is that where people are getting it from? There's a consistency there. Like you said, you realize we're speaking about the same things. You know what I mean? Just with not even necessarily a different language, but just kind of just different descriptive terms. So it's not there's no like for example the my kids brought this up the other day. They were asking about like Noah and the flood because my kids were not obviously they weren't necessarily raised on biblical stories.
Right.
So when they hear things now and stuff, they say, hey, what's this all about? Or what's this? And so my son was asking about this, and he was asking about it in how it relates to something that he had been reading about the Sumerians and their stories about the Anunnaki. And I'm like, okay, great, here we go. I'm like, I'm trying to find a way to explain this to him without like just rambling on and on, about 5,000 year history. So I just explained to him simply, like, look, there was a story written, okay, about a flood, and the Sumerian version, which we found on these cuneiform tablets, is about this man named Utnapishtim who was warned, hey, this is going to happen, because the Anunnaki have basically finished with whatever they need to do with us, so they're just going to like flood the place and move on.
Right.
So years later, these stories are passed on, over time, and like I said, it's like playing telephone. So when you read it with the name Noah instead of Utnapishtim, it's not a different story.
Right.
It's the same story. It's just the names have been changed so that the people who are telling that story can relate. Oh yeah, this is one of our guys. This happened
Right.
to. Not,
Right.
there are lessons there to be learned.
Mhm.
So the lessons to be learned aren't changed by making the guy's name match the people who are telling the story.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So so the story stays the same, and it's just like, wait a minute, even down to the little details of why he was told this was happening and what he should include, and so there's no people keep saying it because there is a validity there. There are certain lessons to be taught in that story,
Mhm.
that that are true valuable lessons. So even though it's spoken with different names, or they change the location, that doesn't change the validity of the story, or the
Okay.
validity of the teaching involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Right.
swear, I feel like you hacked into our questions
Right.
because there's a lot of questions we haven't asked because you hit on them, but you kind of took us to another direction that we want to go into. So,
You see, but that goes back to what you said initially about going to the temple, and I started talking. There are already so many common points.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, I'm not even going to say similarities. Common points. That it's inevitable that we're going to hit those points. Whether we bring them
right,
up as a topic or not, we're going that's going to happen.
Right.
right. And so here's something that me and O'Sheaun think is a common point, but I don't know if other EFI practitioners are necessarily on board with this. But we're gonna throw it out there anyway. When we went to the temple, we saw these things that look like UFOs or spaceships. And then we got in a conversation and you talked about how in your tradition, it kind of speaks matter of factly, about aliens coming to Earth. So, like, speak to the people a little bit about that.
Okay, so when you read, say, not necessarily Bhagavad Gita, but Mahabharata, and before that, a text that we call the Srimad Bhagavatam, okay, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. The word Bhagavat is the word we use for God or the ultimate deity. That's Bhagavat. Bhagavan is what we call him. That's the name. So Bhagavad Gita is Gita means song or tale. So that book, the title of that book is actually, God's song or Bhagavan's song or Bhagavan's tale, or the legend of Bhagavan, which they actually used that title for a movie years ago, a Will Smith movie. You know that movie, The Legend of Bagger Vance. Have you heard of that movie?
Yeah.
The Legend of Bagger Vance. It's a Will Smith movie. That movie is a retelling of the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh wow.
Yeah, using golf and the golf course and his caddy. The main character in the movie is named Ranulph Juna or Juna, and and this guy comes Bagger Vance, Bhagavan, and becomes his golf caddy because he's lost his swing and he's lost his passion for doing anything and for achieving anything. So this guy becomes his caddy. And over the next 18 holes of golf, just like there's 18 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, he instructs him while he's his caddy, his chariot driver,
Wow.
on all the the reasons why he can't give up and why he's supposed to get back into it. So that whole movie is a metaphor for Bhagavad Gita. So Legend of Bhagavan is Legend of Bagger Vance. If you read Srimad Bhagavatam or anything like that, the first thing you come across the story of these the blue and green skinned and like black skinned people or entities, and when I say black I mean literally black, and not brown. I mean, you get these different colored entities who are coming here on from these different worlds in these ships, these flying ships, these vimanas, and it's not, it's just spoken about plainly, like, hey, that's what it is. They came here and they came to do this and they came to do this. And you find this also in a lot of ancient cultures. Like I was talking about the Sumerians, and they talk about the Anunnaki who came down, and that's literally what they call them, those who came down. They descended. Or a lot of these. There's a lot of South American traditions, say, where you have these ancient entities, beings who came, flew down and brought them, civilization, or taught them how to plant food and how to,
Right.
cultivate food and things. So, you know, so many stories, ancient stories throughout the whole planet, say the same thing, but people brush it off and they don't want to, even in Christianity, when they say that Jesus died and rose, after he rose from the dead, he literally ascended into heaven. They don't say it as they're not speaking metaphorically. They say he literally, like, oh, there he goes. You know what I mean? So in our tradition, because it's just so plainly stated, I've always thought of our tradition as a sort of cargo cult. Do you know what I mean by that term? I think we've
I
talked about
know
it.
what you mean by it because you told me.
Yeah,
But
we've
yeah.
discussed it. So all right, during the First World War, all right, we had Western forces establish headquarters basically on some different islands, Micronesian islands. Okay, so you had all of these people who were native to those various islands who had never seen Western people before. They've never seen people from America or people from England or whoever, dressed up in these uniforms and airplanes. they came down in these airplanes and they established, all these buildings and all these different things, and these water filtration systems and all these different things. So when World War One ended, on a lot of these islands, there sprang up what we call cargo cults.
Mm.
These people, now think about this, these are people who have never seen any Western people before. They've no, all of a sudden, these flying ships come and bring all these people who are, more technologically advanced, people who every couple of months are receiving supplies from these flying ships. Because what would happen was, the American ships would fly over and they would literally drop giant crates of cargo, weapons, food, things like that, medical supplies. So these people became so fascinated by this that when the Western forces left and vacated, a lot of them formed these religions based on, wait a minute, if we pray to those entities who came here, then they'll send back the flying ships will come back to bring us, food, sustenance, things that, because
Right.
that's how it worked. They would get on they would, get on their communications and tell them what they needed, and these ships would come and like literally drop food from the heavens, and so you have all these cults, and it's amazing. There's so many pictures. If you were to Google it, you find all these pictures. There's one in particular called the John Frum cult, and they have parades every year where they all dress up in like American style military uniforms. They have all these like rifles that they've made out of like wood and different things, and they have these like military parades. They literally have giant airplanes, model airplanes made of like wood and like bamboo and sticks, and they're really nice, some of them, because their whole thing is like, okay, wait, this is how we worship. This is how we get these gods, to take care of us. So in our temples, I came to think of it in a very similar way. As you've seen, we have in our temple, we have the deities on the altar, okay, and above them we have those vimanas, those flying saucer looking things, and so we have to do the same things that our predecessors did, our ancestors did, in order to achieve the same things, to have these entities take care of us.
Right.
You know what I mean, to have them visit us and take care of us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a lot of our our rituals or ritual practices, to me, are very similar to what these cargo cults do. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, we weren't alive when those entities came and visited and took care of everybody. So the way for us to get them to come back and take care of us and do the same is by doing the same things that our predecessors did, so in a lot of ways, I think of our practices, like I said, as kind of a cargo cult, because we are not, we haven't, turned around and said like, oh, well, those stories about the flying ships and all that, that wasn't, really what was meant. So what was meant was this. No, we accepted it as like, no, that's what it was. It, as it was told to us, that's, so we go about the same things, based on
Mm-hmm.
that. What I was saying before about, religious factuality. My whole thing is that if I can find any archaeological or historical or scientific basis for any of these things that I'm taught, then I'm good with it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I
Right.
don't have to like throw it out as like some guy's wacky idea. And one of the things is that what people don't realize, when a lot of these ancient texts were written, okay, like for instance the ones that talk about Vimanas, say, it wasn't until, the 20th century that the majority of people could, read and write.
Mm-hmm.
So these ancient texts that were written, they weren't written for your average person to just be, reading to their kids at home. They weren't read for, people to be, uh, you know, learning about in school or when they're educated, because most people couldn't read and write at all,
Right.
and that's a problem, because that's what allowed certain Western traditions to teach people that, like, no, you just accept what I've told you as the truth, and that's it, because they couldn't go
Mm-hmm.
find out otherwise,
Right.
so a lot of these ancient things, when these stories were being written about these entities, coming here in these, flying ships or whatever, or these entities coming from elsewhere, from some different planet or some different world. Um, those stories weren't written as like fiction to be sold to people. If these people were trying to document something that they were seeing or
Mm-hmm.
something that they were happening, just like the cargo cults. These people were documenting. Oh, well, these guys all did this parade, and these guys got on these like communication devices, and as a result, the gods came in these ships, these flying ships, and brought them what they needed. So they these cargo cults, these people weren't trying to tell some magical story. They were trying to write down what happened. And all right, well, wait a minute. How do I do this? You know what I mean? So
Right.
I feel the same way about the Vedic texts, that a lot of this stuff was written because people were just trying to document things that were happening. They weren't, trying to, give you some fantastical story that a movie can be made out of, and stuff, because, none of that existed. There was, archaeology, say, in the 1990s, there was, there were the first instances of marine archaeology in India. Now, whether it was because there wasn't educational support for it, or there wasn't financial support for it, it just hadn't really been done before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you had this guy, this archaeologist named S.R. Rao, and he was conducting these surveys, okay, over the water off of the city of Dwarka in India. Now, the modern day city of Dwarka in India is where they say Krishna was actually king thousands of years ago. Okay, so, and that's fine. Everybody has their stories based in a place that, like I was saying before, based in a place that people can relate to.
Right.
Um, it's like the construction of the Book of Mormon, say, you know, when when the basis of the story, or the location of the story, is a place that you are familiar with, your people are from, and your people can relate to, that makes the story more important. You're more likely to lend an ear to the story, um, because it's personal then.
Absolutely.
So Rao started to discover under the water off of the coast. They found this whole city basically under the water, which was the ancient city of Dwarka. What happened was they started to find coins. They started to find little statues, deities and stuff like that they would pull up, and they realized, okay, wait a minute, this whole city exists. The only way we can date it really is we have to figure out, when was this above water. You know, the end of the last ice age, about 10,500 BCE, is when it was when the last ice age ended. Okay, so you've got continents where, once the glaciers start melting and the water starts rising, you know, you're going to lose the whole,
Mm-hmm.
all of the continents as they exist now are much smaller than what they were, before the end of the last ice age, obviously, because that water was held up in ice, so
Mm-hmm.
the continents were large. So when the water starts rising, the ice starts melting, the water starts rising, you lose, the coastlines, and the continents, they don't shrink, but they become submerged to a large extent.
Mm-hmm.
We lost, I believe it was something like almost 70% 50% of the landmass of the Earth was submerged underwater after the end of the last ice age.
Wow.
Yeah. So where do we build civilizations typically, initially? All along the coast. You know what I mean? Because the water is a source. For everything we need. So they started to find that off the coast of the various continents, 100 miles out or less, you start finding all these remnants of civilization, remnants of different cities or living places. So it's like, wait a minute. In the Bhagavatam, okay, there's a story that towards the end of Krishna's time on Earth at that time, he said he was going to leave the planet, and he told all the people in Dwarka, "Hey, you need to kind of push back and move away from here because when I leave the planet, the waters will rise and completely take over the entire city." You have people who think of that in a mythological way, But then you have people like me who are obsessed with history and archaeology, and it's like, wait a minute, 10,500 years ago, that's what happened. The water, so the people who were writing that story were trying to tell you about an actual historical event.
Right.
So now does that mean Krishna is God? Does that mean no? But it means that someone someone knew what happened and was trying to kind of pass that on to other people, which is why we have these flood stories in so many different religious traditions that are all very, very similar, and just the names are changed, because like you said before, if people keep saying it must be true. There has to be some kind of truth to it. If this is, people who have had nothing to do with each other on different parts of the planet all wrote this same story down or tried to document this same event, so that's why things like the flying ships and the vimanas and stuff like that. I put those all in the same boat because they were written by the same people who were telling me about these events that we know happened.
Absolutely.
We can prove historically and archaeologically that these things did happen.
Right.
So it makes me not doubt some of the other things that we haven't necessarily proven yet. Like I personally haven't seen any flying ships, but
Right.
but I also haven't seen the thousands of other planets out there that science has proven exist and are out there, so I
Absolutely.
can't see them with my own eyes. So I can't, because I haven't seen them with my own eyes. I can't necessarily doubt that they exist. I mean, I can't see gravity either.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can't see oxygen either.
Exactly.
But science has proven to me, though, explained to me that these things exist. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, so that's why a lot of the things like with the flying ships and all that, I
Mhm.
don't think of it as some fantastic, kind of mythical thing. I think of it as just something else that I haven't seen that was documented by people who documented a bunch of the other things that I have seen.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
so I don't have a lot of reason to doubt.
Right. So we just got a couple of more questions that we think are just kind of important topics to hit on before we let you go. One of the things that is near and dear to my heart has to do with the aspect of health.
Sure,
I've
yeah.
told I've told the story many times on different podcasts that when I go to different you know elay events, if I want to eat, I got to bring my own food. But I didn't have that issue when I went to your temple. And real quick though, while we're at it, go ahead and shout out your temple before we forget that.
Yeah, my temple is actually my guru's first temple in the West. It is the Sri Sri Radha Govindaji temple um, in Houston, and it's on Cape Harrow. Um, and it is, like I said, it's my guru's first temple in the West. The first one he opened when he started coming to America. And, we were all there when he laid the cornerstone. He didn't get to see it completed, because he left his body before it was completed. But he did, lay the cornerstone and bless the whole area and kind of give us the green light. Like, all right, this is the spot. You know.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Well, again, going back to the body, the health, that whole aspect, I
Mhm.
can't think of a religion or a spiritual tradition that does it in one way, shape, or form, kind of speak to the body being a temple, right? And the importance of the body. I always say that in Ifa, health is and how to eat is something that you will find in the Odu Ifa, but it's not something that you find in practice. And, oftentimes spiritual people can be very arrogant, like, we know something that the the Christians, for example, they haven't figured out. And so there's a little bit of an arrogance there. But in actuality, we're no happier, no healthier, or anything like that than the Christians with all that we supposedly know. What does your tradition talk about in regards to, like, health and diet and things of that nature?
So we are in these bodies, right? We put gas in my car because it's not going to go anywhere without the gas in the car. I need to make
Right.
sure that the oil is maintained in the car. I need to make sure that the air is maintained in the tires, because I'm in there and I can't expect this vehicle to get me to where I need to go or where I need to be if I don't maintain it or if I don't provide it with whatever it needs to be able to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so with regard to food, we don't, it's not that we eat or don't eat certain things, um, because we consider them, like bad or wrong. The basis of it all is that in Bhagavad Gita, uh, Krishna describes what he will accept as an offering. All right, and it's very basic: plants, water. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, but he never says that he will accept, like flesh from any animal that's killed or anything like that. Everything that we eat, we offer first to the deities.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and not in a kind of way like not like in an Old Testament sacrifice kind of way, but in the way of
Right.
like the tradition of Father's Day. You always hear about the little kid getting his dad a tie for Father's Day. You know what I mean? That you always see in like the Hallmark commercials and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, obviously, the kid, the father doesn't need the tie from the kid,
Right. Right.
and obviously, the kid used the father's money to get it anyway. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not that he's offering him something, of his own that the kid is the gesture is more important than the
Mhm.
actual gift. So when my kid gives me a tie for Father's Day, he's presenting me with something that I already owned, that was already mine. My money was used to get this thing. You know what I mean? So when we offer our food, the idea is that you know the deities don't need my food. They don't need, you know what I mean? They don't need my cooking, like, in order to exist, in order to be maintained. It's just the gesture or the acknowledgement that this was put here in order for us to maintain, to live, in order to maintain our vehicle, in order for our vehicle to get from point A to point B, um, without dying. So it's described that these are the things you don't put in the vehicle. These are the things you do put in the vehicle. Um, so when we make our offering, we only offer what Krishna has already said that he will accept as an offering.
Mhm.
So that's why we don't, offer, like, I don't know, here's some, I don't know, what do they call the pork cutlets or whatever. So, Krishna never said that's what. No, I never mentioned I'm accepting that. And there's also the idea that we are, because we are all jivas in these bodies, souls incarnating, in that word incarnation,
Hmm.
it means meat, it means flesh. So we are incarnate. We are souls inside flesh. So we consider the animals to be the same. Because if we were not, if we don't believe that we were created as some special thing separate from them, these animals came from the same place we did, and the souls that are inhabiting their bodies came from the same place we did. So who am I to make them leave their bodies so that somehow I can eat it, that.
Right.
And we also have these holidays several times a year where they're called Ekadasi. And the Ekadasi days are days when it's advised that you avoid certain grains, certain vegetables, and these are all seasonal holidays or seasonal observations, where if you kind of go back in time and look at it, it's like, oh, well, there are certain times of the year based on the weather where it's not beneficial to have certain nutrients. It's beneficial to have certain other nutrients, in your body instead, So on these days, it's advised that, for this 2-week period or for this month-long period, we're supposed to stay away from this, and this, but include these different kinds of beans instead in our diet. There might be, like, say, winter. There might be a time when more protein is required by our
Right.
particular vehicles. You know what I mean? Or certain times of year where it's advisable to have less acidic kind of vegetables or fruits in your system during that particular temperature or that particular season. So all of these things were written in as kind of religious observances to kind of get people to understand that, like, there's no difference between physically taking care of your health and spiritually taking care of your health. Like, these should go hand in hand. These are,
Right.
these are,
Right.
so that's why they were kind of written in as religious observations, so that people are more likely to adhere to them than to just ignore them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Certain Christians at certain times of year, like, they'll, oh, wait, I can't eat red meat on this day of the year, or this day. So they'll eat, like, fish instead. And I'm like, I don't think you got the point of the the whole instruction. You know what I mean? I can't, you're ignoring
Yeah.
the point of the whole thing. So we we make it so that the health consideration is just as important as the chanting or the meditative considerations. Like, you're made to understand, or you're taught that those go hand in hand.
Right.
Because if this whole thing is, I'm trying not to come back and be incarnated in another body in this place again, right? So I am taught certain things in order to
Make that a
maintain my
reality.
maintain my spiritual health, so that I can do these different things. But I
Right.
can't do these different things without the physical body.
Right.
So we're to understand that, like, no, you need to accept that what you put in that body is just as important as the mantras you're chanting, or just as important as the sound vibrations you're invoking, because they're all part of the big picture. They're all part of
Mm-hmm.
the process.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I
are you
love
so
that.
so just to ask a follow-up question, or is it that you are only consuming that which the God or Krishna consumes?
It's considered, philosophically, it's considered that we make the offering. We cook up this whole offering, and we offer it to them, and then we get to we eat the remnants,
Mm-hmm.
of what the deity. I mean, you've been to the temple, the deities aren't physically eating
Right, right, right.
Right.
the plates. So yeah, it's considered that we consume the remnants because we're supposed to consume the same thing that they do,
Mm-hmm.
because that we are quantitatively different from them, but qualitatively the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we don't
Yes.
like like these different deities are souls, entities, eternal souls inside the bodies, just like we are. So so when it's taught like, oh, this is what they use to keep themselves going, then yeah, that's what we're supposed to use also.
Right.
So we get theirs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, just a couple more questions. I know I just
Yeah,
said that a minute ago, but this for real now. So
I mean, we
I
could do
read
this for days. You know what I mean?
absolutely, absolutely. I read Sadhguru's book, Inner Engineering.
Hmm.
And one of the things that he said in that book that I thought was fascinating, he talked about that Indian temples weren't actually created to be places of prayer. He said like that the people would go to these places like first thing in the morning as kind of a way to like recharge your battery, so to speak. So what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, we always talk about how like my kids will sometimes ask, like, what other traditions, they on different holidays they go to church, or they go to church to like to pray or whatever. And for us, you don't have to be in that physical building. You don't that their building isn't the place uh for that. I personally like to go sometimes and chant or do my, like, bhakti yoga, or meditate in the temple. And I think we've discussed this the last time we were there.
Mm-hmm.
um because our whole tradition is based on, like I said, we're in these bodies, we're in these chariots, right? And we got those five horses pulling us all over the place, right?
Right.
So that's why when we, you know, pray, when our prayer, or our chanting, we try to engage all of the five senses, because we're in here, what I mean? We're in this, stuck in this city of nine gates. Um, so when we chant, you know, like our beads, you know, we we have the sense of touch. We always, make sure that we have something to actually like touch and feel,
Right.
Then you've got, um, the incense constantly
Mm-hmm.
to engage that sense,
Right.
then you have, and then of course, our food, um, then the visual, we have the deities, and the deities are designed in such a way that the symbolism that's used to create the deities is supposed to help us focus our mind in the opposite way of the way, say Buddhist meditation, silent meditation. This is 2025. We live in the modern world. Where are you doing silent meditation? There's dogs barking outside. There's cars going by. You know what I mean? There's the air conditioner humming. You can't. It's impossible to really do silent meditation. So our prayers, or our chanting, it's done out loud, so we can actually hear it. All of these things. Like I said, we try to engage all of the five senses in our prayer, so that the mind can be focused, instead of trying to falsely renunciate, and oh, I'm going to achieve this like blank state. No, you're not. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's and if you can do that, then you're much better than I am, because it's impossible for me to do. So we use mantra and prayer, all that, to do that. And we mark our bodies. You've seen before, um the clay marking that I put on my face, that we call it
Mm-hmm.
the T-lock mark. That is to mark your body as the temple. I'm in here. You know what I mean? So this is my temple. Um, the physical building is not a place for me to pray. That's a place for the deities. You,
Right.
you know what I mean? And of course, because of the age we're in, and the way we do things, that's where we'll meet and lecture to each other, or exchange information. But it's not necessarily the place to pray. The place to pray is in your temple. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
so that's
Absolutely.
so that's why we mark the body as the temple, and that's why when we do our chanting and stuff like that, I'm not going to. I don't have to be in some building that's been designated for that. I'm in that building. I'm in that place already. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%. That's the temple is definitely the place to like recharge in more ways than one. Like when you live in the temple, or when you live near a temple in the old days, that's where you go to have your meals.
Mm.
You know, like you know, when you're uh, like I said, when you're the priest, the monk in the temple, that's where your meals are coming from each day. And when we go and we have our like programs, the main thing about that program is chanting, so that we get the sound vibration, you know, like the communal chanting, um, and the meal after. And it's always all of the ladies at the temple are very much like grandmothers, you know what I mean? There's like, oh, you know, you have to eat. You have to, you know, what do you, you know, you need to go. Come on, man, you need to go eat. You need, like, all of them insist that you're getting too skinny and whatever. You have to go eat, and you know,
Right.
and that's partially because they're, you know, they're very motherly, of course, and they, you know, they want you to eat, but that's also because that's where literally where you recharge, you know, by you know, getting your your sustenance and all that. That's how you live, you know. So yeah, the temple is very much considered a place to go and like recharge and, you know, kind of, you know, plug back in for the day, and not necessarily the place where you have to go and say your, you know, say your prayers, you know.
Absolutely. And so when I was trying to tap into my meditation, I
Hmm.
didn't call another E5 priest, you know, or
Yeah.
I went to the professional, the people who have mastered this meditation thing. I called you, and I met you over at the temple, and you
Hmm.
know we meditated in the whole nine. So thank you again for that beautiful experience. You know,
Yeah,
but you have to get out of dogma to be able to do stuff like that.
right, of course. And you know, and it in the Bhagavad Gita, if you read Bhagavad Gita, you see that at the end, one of the last things that Krishna instructs everyone on is that, there you go. One of the last things Krishna says is, once, you know, once you get it, that he advises that you abandon all dogma and abandon all forms of, you know, religion,
Mm.
because those are only, you know, all of those things are just kind of instruction booklets to get you to a certain point. You know, they're not to make you stay in those practices. You know, they're to help you move away from that, and to get, you know, to actually achieve a level of consciousness, or achieve an understanding that you don't need to do those things anymore.
Mm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? When you're a kid and you learn to ride a bike and you have the training wheels on, you know, the idea isn't like, oh, okay, I can put these training wheels on and that'll help me stay on the bike.
Mhm.
No,
Right,
that's just, those are just being used to guide you, to teach you how to, you know, get to that state of balance and state of awareness where you don't need them anymore. And now,
Right.
okay, now I got it. I can just keep going. I don't need the
right,
training wheels. And that's the ultimate lesson in Bhagavad Gita, is Krishna saying, like, look, do all this until you get it, and then you know, you abandon the dogma and the, you know, the rigid like rules and the strict, because then, you know, the whole point is to get you beyond that, the need for those things, and that,
Mhm.
you know.
hmm right, right.
Mhm. So we got one more question for you,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's fitting that this would be at the end. I definitely had to sneak this in because I have this, and I don't want people to think that it's macabre or anything like that, but I have this fascination with death. This 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 fascination with how different cultures and different spiritual traditions view death. So in Hinduism, how is death viewed? What happens to the body, and what happens to this? What do you call it? The jiva. What happens to the jiva when the body dies?
Science, you know, we learn from science, you know, thermodynamics, you know, the different,
Mhm.
the idea that energy cannot be created or destroyed,
Mhm.
right?
hmm Just
So
changes.
obviously there is some form of energy. You know, if you've never been, you know, told by some book what to call it, you know what I mean? It doesn't, you know that there's obviously some kind of energy animating this fleshy thing, right?
Mhm.
And you also know that when something dies, obviously that energy leaves that thing, right? But science has proven and explained to us that um, that energy that exists in that body, in that flesh, has always existed
Mm-hmm.
and always will.
Yes.
This is parallel to what we believe, exactly what we believe about what we call the soul or the jiva, that it has always existed and it always will. It is just right now it is inside this particular vessel.
Right.
Um, and that's not a theory. I mean, we know what living things are, and we know what things that aren't living are. And obviously there is no more energy in that body, but that energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transferred elsewhere.
Right.
Okay, and we know that all of the energy that exists now has always existed and is all of the energy that will exist. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so at some point when the soul leaves the body, all right, think about think about when you were a little kid, right? When you were a little kid, say you're, I don't know, 7 years old, say, right? You had, teeth, hair, body. You can see pictures. You know that body is not the same body that you're in right now, right? And it's not that body has just grown. It's literally not the same body anymore. I mean, we lose skin all day.
Right.
You know what I mean? Our hair grows out, and new hair grows in. It falls out. We lose our teeth, and the teeth come back. We even know that our bones regenerate from the bone marrow out. Every 7 years, our blood is constantly we our blood exits our body regularly. And is new blood is formed, regenerated. I remember being 7 years old. I remember being 14 years old. I remember being 21. I remember being 28. I know that was me, in those pictures, what I mean, on those videotapes. I know that was me, but
Right.
I also know that that body that I was in is gone. Like from the time I was 7 to the time I was 21 years old, I literally don't have the same skin, the same bones, the same blood, the same hair, the same teeth, none of it. That's all gone. It's all flushed down the toilet. It's all falling off, and half or most of the dust actually in our house, when we have dust, that's actually skin. You know what I mean? So I don't need science or any ancient book to tell me that I'm not literally not in the same body anymore as I was back then, but I have the memories of being there then, so I know it was me, you know? So the entire time that we have been growing or aging, our body has been dying and leaving us. And we've been every 7 years or so, medicine tells us we're in a new body, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, our thinking is death really shouldn't be a surprise. Leaving the body is something we've been practicing the entire time. You know, I've been leaving my body this entire time, and nobody's been crying about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, my mom will look at the pictures when I was like, oh, I miss when you were a little kid, but she misses when I was in that body. She doesn't miss that person from then, but that entity, that being, I am still here. You know, um, but the body isn't, and it's been going on like this. It's been like taking off a shirt and putting on a new one the next day. And say, we've been doing this and we've been practicing for this our whole lives. So on the day when we're going to leave the body, it's not something that should come as a surprise really to people. You know what I mean? And yes, of course we get emotional about not being around that person anymore, but it is our belief that that person still exists that because that person was not the body, that person was the energy that animated that body. So, we know for a fact that body, that energy still exists once that physical container doesn't exist anymore. So that's kind of why, like, cremation is a common practice, because it's like, well, the body is not, I have pictures. I don't need, I don't need to keep the body in a box. You know what I'm saying? Krishna explains this to Arjuna also. At one point, he says to him, because Arjuna's like, I can't kill these people. I can't make these people leave their bodies. I can't. And Krishna kind of gets like, he kind of rolls his eyes, and it's just like, I've already killed these people so many times before. Like, you don't, you know what I mean? And some people are like, that's your religious book. That's your Bible. It says, well, yeah, because it's a fact. You know what I mean? How many times have we incarnated in these bodies, and and left and come back again? So Krishna explains to Arjuna, there was never a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor any of these kings or these warriors, nor shall there ever be a time when we will cease to be. So our idea is that, yeah, it sucks that we've gotten close to certain people that we might not necessarily physically see their container anymore, but we've been rehearsing for this the whole time. So to be surprised is a weird kind of thing, to be shocked. I mean, yeah, it's shocking when when someone's 20 years old and and they die, because it's like, well, crap, they didn't get to do half of the things that they needed to do, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe they did.
Right.
Maybe that's why they were allowed to get out of the body early, like, hey, you know what? You're good. You can go. You know what I mean? You don't need to come back here in this, and most of our mantras actually are the repetition of names. It's kind of like on some level, we are very much like an ancestor worship kind of tradition, because all of our mantras, prayers, and stuff are the repetition of the names of those who are gone now, who are not here physically, in our physical presence anymore. And that goes to why we are, just going back to the very first, the start of the conversation, that goes to why we are called Hare Krishnas in America. Because when it first came over to the West, people would always see people chanting out in the streets, or in New York, they'd be out in the park, chanting and out in the park, and not in the temple, because they didn't need to, they're outside chanting, and people, used to see them all the time, and one of our most common prayers, or the one we use most often, that we call the Maha Mantra. Maha means great, like the great mantra. And the word mantra means man, means mind, and trop means literally to free or to release. So mantra is something that you use to free the mind and release the mind. So the Maha Mantra, the great mantra, is what a lot of people call the Hare Krishna mantra. The common one they always hear: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is just a repetition of names. Okay, so when you see, when in the early days in the 60s, when it first came over to America, people would see these wackos in the street with these robes on, singing Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So they started to call them, oh yeah, those people, those are the Hare Krishnas, because that's what they hear them saying all the time. That would be, and that's not a derogatory term, calling, it's like the same thing as if you called, like, Catholics, oh, those are the Hail Marys. Well, why do you call them the Hail Marys? That's the thing I hear them saying all the time. So that's what that's what they're called. So it's not, it's not, it's not a derogatory term or anything like that. You know, kind of, oh, those are the Hare Krishnas. It's just that it's just the, you know, what people heard. So it's not what we call ourselves, or what the name of, you know, the tradition is or anything. So, you know, when someone dies, you know, think about, you know, or even when someone's still alive that you haven't seen for a long time. All right. Say I get on the phone with you and I'm like, oh, you know what? I haven't seen him in so long. Uh, and you bring up their name in the conversation. As soon as you bring up that person's name, because of the kind of beings we are, you start to picture them in your head. You hear their voice.
Right.
You know, you think of like things that you've done with them. You know, different. So that's the whole purpose of a lot of our mantras, to bring those images to mind of the names of the entities we're singing about, or whose names we're repeating. Um, and you know, so that's why it's very much like a kind of a reminder that, oh, well, that entity, that name you're repeating, that person still exists and always has. Just because you can't see them physically, you know, we already know, like I said, all religious beliefs aside, scientifically we know that they still exist and they always have. You
Right.
know,
Right.
so it's
Right.
almost kind of selfish in a way for us to say, you know, when we say, you know, when we get upset that someone, like, you know, leaves their body, you know, we're upset because, you know, for selfish reasons, we don't get to see them anymore. We don't get to hear them anymore. You know what I mean? But they, you know, they still exist. They're still around. So you kind of, you're honoring them by repeating their names, and, you know, repeating things about them, and, you know, singing their praises, as it were. You know what I mean? So because we don't believe that there is such a thing as death. You know?
Right. I say. Well, we greatly, greatly appreciate this conversation. Like
Very much.
I know I learned a whole lot, and you know, we ended the conversation with a question about death, and but then you turned and it ended on ancestors, which is near and dear to our practice. So that was a very fitting ending to a great, great conversation, and we greatly
So
appreciate you.
we could do this for hours. You know what I mean? And we should
Absolutely.
anyway. You know, and we.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much on the internet about foolishness that having a spiritual conversation is definitely necessary. So, again, man, we greatly appreciate, you know, you coming in and you blessing us with your
Oh,
knowledge. So, again, it's not just us, man. Like I said, across the world and different plots of land all over, man, people are talking about the same things in
yeah.
different manners, but it's all the same information. So, family, hit that like button. Make
Yeah,
sure you share. Go ahead.
yeah, you know, the only problem with that is that people need to turn it around and realize that it's supposed to be used as something to let us all know that we are speaking the same language.
Right.
You know, and too often this whole planet, everybody uses it as a us versus them thing. You know, and that's part of the grander scheme of things, the divide and conquer. You know what I mean? If you can keep people believing that we don't speak the same language and we're not talking about the same things, you know, then that keeps us down. And that, you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then one last thing too. I mean,
yeah,
we were treated tremendously when we went. I mean, we went in there. We had all the leques on and everything. But I mean, we were treated tremendously well. I'm sure there are other places with different traditions that if we went and showed up looking how we showed up, we wouldn't have gotten, we wouldn't have been received like we were received when we went to your temple. So, you know, we're definitely gonna come back. You know,
to say that you don't, you know, you don't. Hare Krishnas in like the 70s and 80s had a reputation for and it's hilarious, you know, selling books and giving out flowers and stuff like that in the airports, and, like, you know, trying to recruit people and stuff like that. And, you know, my guru's whole thing is like, no, you don't do that. You don't push things on people. If someone wants something, they're going to come get it.
Absolutely.
And if they do, that's when you offer them everything everything they want. Give them everything that you have, every piece of it. I mean, you don't turn anybody away. Like, what I'm saying? You just don't do that. I mean, the
Absolutely.
like my guru didn't do that to me when I wanted this information. Like I said, he turned to me as a friend. Like, oh man, this is what I got. Here you go. It wasn't, the fact that I was wearing, jeans or whatever didn't say, you know what, maybe this is not for you. That
Right.
has nothing to do with it.
Absolutely.
That's,
Right.
you know,
Right. Right. Again, we appreciate everything.
I
Family,
appreciate you guys having me.
don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You'll be hearing from us again. Another episode. We in the lab working, so we got some great things coming for you here in the future. So we appreciate you for coming back. We appreciate you. Always remember, life's a journey. Don't forget the map. Peace.
Peace.